Dokja ends the negotiation by making it clear that he knows the constellations are eager to discover the avatar who dared to challenge the regressor. Meanwhile, Beyong stares at his messages in pure panic. His stress levels shoot through the roof as he scolds Dokja, trying to remind him of a simple fact: avatars backed by constellations always have the upper hand against those who don't. That's just how the system works. Dokja doesn't bother to argue. Instead, he tells Beyong that this is exactly what he plans to prove from now on. Without giving the stressed-out Dokja a chance to complain, he tells him to shut up and follow orders. Then he throws in a promise he will make Beyong the Dokja king. Beyong's tiny brain struggles to process everything, and he hesitates, torn between the risk and the reward. Meanwhile, Dokja just smiles, watching Beyong suffer through his decision-making process. Eventually, the Dokja gives in and begins the checkout process, but Dokja immediately stops him when he tries to charge 5,100 coins. He argues that he hasn't actually failed the scenario yet, so the charge is unnecessary. Dokja gets up, his stone trembling as if reacting to his will. With complete confidence, he declares that he will fulfill the condition. Without waiting for Beyong's approval, he demands that the channel be opened. The Dokja, still confused and overwhelmed, stares at him like he's lost his mind. But Dokja remains unfazed. He simply points out that things are about to begin. Before Beyong can process anything, a system notification appears for both of them. A hidden scenario has arrived. Beyong looks like he's about to pass out, but Dokja, as usual, stays completely calm. The new challenge is an A-difficulty hidden scenario called Commander Slayer. The goal is to kill the Sea Commander Ichthyosaur and escape within 10 days. Failure means death. Success comes with a reward of 9,000 coins. And as soon as the channel opens, Beyong scrambles to deal with the constellations flooding his live stream, while Dokja focuses on the more important matter, checking the limited items in the Dokja shop, carefully considering his next move. Dokja struggles to find the search feature in the Dokja shop, which is incredibly inconvenient since he doesn't have time to scroll through an endless list of overpriced junk. Earlier, he had forced Beyong to open the shop, taking advantage of the fact that it only becomes accessible while the channel is live. That explains why Beyong is currently busy rambling through explanations while juggling his other stress, constellations bombarding his stream. In the middle of Beyong's meltdown, Dokja casually asks for help. The Dokja, looking like he just lost the last shred of hope he had left, informs him that the search button is tucked away in the bottom right corner. Dokja quickly types in Ancient Dragon, catching Beyong off guard. The Dokja stares at him, wondering how this guy even knows about such rare items. Dokja, being the master of nonsense that he is, simply throws out an excuse, claiming he just picked a cool-sounding name at random. Not that it matters, because the item is already sold out. Dokja feels a tiny pang of disappointment, remembering that, according to Tessa, the lucky buyer was some Italian guy whose rich sponsor snatched it up for him. With no time to dwell on it, Dokja moves on and searches for the Archdemon's eyeball and the White Star weapon aura. Once again, his knowledge leaves Beyong speechless. At this point, the Dokja should really stop being surprised by Dokja pulling information out of nowhere. Instead of anything fancy, Dokja ends up purchasing 4 bags of seahorse mucus and 4 thorns for a total of 800 coins. Beyong, confused and slightly disgusted, demands to know what Dokja plans to do with such weird items. Dokja, in classic fashion, refuses to explain, making it clear that Beyong will just have to wait and see. Of course, he acknowledges the warning there are no refunds. Meanwhile, the constellations react. The secretive plotter shows interest in Dokja's latest scheme, while the abyssal black flame dragon, as expected, remains committed to hating every single thing Dokja does. Beyong, finally shutting off the stream, brings up the pending offer again. Dokja, without a hint of doubt, tells him that they'll negotiate the contract after clearing the scenario. Beyong, clearly fed up but also kind of curious, decides to leave and see if Dokja can actually survive this hidden scenario. Before he leaves, he mutters something about Dokja being arrogant. Dokja, unfazed, brushes him off with full confidence. Beyong, for once, actually wishes Dokja luck before snapping his fingers and disappearing in a flash of light. The brightness hits Dokja right in the face, making him squint and block his eyes. Once the annoying Dokja finally vanishes, he pulls out his phone, checks the time, and confirms what he already suspected. There isn't much time left before the stomach acid floods the place. Without wasting another second, he paddles for the massive body of the Ichthyosaur. As he gets closer, he pulls out a small pouch, takes out the seahorse mucus, and smears it onto the thorn. The smell alone is enough to make a lesser man gag, but Dokja barely reacts. Turning his attention back, he sees the inevitable. The stomach acid is about to pour in. The moment the acidic liquid starts spreading, Dokja's grip on the thorn tightens. There's no turning back now. If he hesitates, he'll be dissolved into nothing in seconds. With every bit of strength he has, he drives the thorn into the Ichthyosaur's stomach, determined to get out of this disgusting mess alive. Meanwhile, the outside world is in complete chaos. 4 meteorites crash onto the Earth, setting the entire city on fire. The sea turns into a nightmare as monsters crawl out, adding to the destruction. Among them, one of the ichthyosaurs suddenly flinches and lets out an ear-splitting roar. Inside its body, the stomach acid churns violently, burning through anything unfortunate enough to be caught in it, including lifeless corpses that never had a chance. Despite everything, Dokja manages to keep himself alive. Using the thorns as footholds, he climbs upward, avoiding the rising acid. Every breath feels heavier, his body screams in exhaustion, and his mind starts to waver. He struggles to keep track of time, wondering if he's made a mistake. The doubt creeps in, whispering that maybe he overestimated himself. After all, he isn't some chosen hero, just a reader, a nobody who somehow ended up inside the story. His vision begins to blur, the light in his eyes dimming, but the scenario isn't over yet. Dokja blinks, his body overwhelmed with exhaustion, and a heavy wave of sleepiness washes over him. He forces himself to stay awake, reminding himself that this isn't a dream, though he really wishes it were. His old life wasn't exactly great, but at least he didn't have to fight for survival inside the stomach of an overgrown sea monster. As the ichthyosaur's body begins to dry up, the area suddenly lights up with bursts of static, the blinding flashes cutting through the darkness. Dokja doesn't move. His hands remain clenched around the thorn, his breath coming out in ragged gasps as his body shakes from sheer effort. Biyang reappears, staring in disbelief. The Dokja actually looks impressed, probably shocked that Dokja is still breathing after pulling off another reckless stunt. A system notification appears, announcing that several constellations are entertained by Dokja's ability to stay alive despite having the survival instincts of a sleep-deprived student cramming for finals. As a result, they toss him a pity reward of 100 coins. On the 4th day of the hidden scenario, Biyang finally acknowledges the absurdity of Dokja's plan, especially the unexpected way he used the thorns. However, before anything else can be said, Dokja's body gives up. His vision blacks out and he collapses with a dull thud. At the same time, the hidden scenario officially comes to an end. The ichthyosaur lies dead, and the system announces the rewards. Dokja receives 9,000 coins for clearing the scenario, along with an extra 1,000 coins as a special achievement. Apparently, he is the first person to take down a Tier 7 sea monster. He would probably feel proud of that if he weren't currently sprawled inside the remains of the beast, struggling to catch his breath. Meanwhile, Biyang, having recovered from his shock, rambles about stone hogs, explaining how they live on shores and survive by feeding on tiny sea creatures. Their signature thorns pierce prey and drain them dry. He stares at the thorns stuck inside the ichthyosaur, still unable to believe that someone actually thought to use it as a weapon against a massive sea monster. Another system notification appears, revealing that some constellations are grinning, clearly amused. They seem to understand exactly why Dokja did what he did. Some constellations, being the nosy spectators they are, demand that Dokja explain his plans so they can keep up with his next move. They clearly don't trust him to just sit quietly and survive like a normal person. Meanwhile, Biyang helps Dokja sit up, still reeling from the fact that the mucus from a hammer seahorse actually protected him from the ichthyosaur's stomach acid. Dokja had thought ahead and covered himself in the hammer seahorse's mucus before using the stone hog's thorn. It wasn't exactly a pleasant experience, but it got the job done. He even managed to satisfy his hunger by absorbing the ichthyosaur's bodily fluids through the thorn, which sounds disgusting, but hey, survival isn't glamorous. His stamina stat even increases from 11 to 12, though it's still barely above pathetic. To clear up Biyang's confusion, Dokja explains that hammer seahorses produce a special mucus to protect themselves from ichthyosaurs, their natural predators. That same mucus is what allowed him to survive the acid. Though it wasn't completely painless, he definitely felt it, just not enough to dissolve into a puddle. Thankfully, his fourth wall skill dulls the worst of the pain, letting him push through it. Biyang, on the other hand, is having the time of his life watching this ridiculous survival drama unfold. He gets so excited that he even asks the constellations if they're enjoying the show. Dokja, already done with everything, pulls himself to his feet and demands that Biyang open the Dokja shop. Later, he takes one of his thorns and drives it into the wall, only to stumble upon something unexpected, the ichthyosaur's nucleus. Biyang's jaw practically hits the floor in shock, clearly not expecting Dokja to just casually dig up something so valuable. Dokja wastes no time grabbing the nucleus, already thinking about profits. He tells Biyang to put it up for sale in the Dokja auction house, but with one specific condition: he will only accept broken faith as payment. Before Dokja can focus on business, Biyang shifts gears and cheerfully informs the constellations that they will be back after a short commercial break. Dokja barely hides his irritation, knowing full well that this entire thing is basically reality TV for cosmic entities who have nothing better to do. Before Dokja even realizes it, a fully written contract appears in front of him. Byung, having just witnessed Dokja clear the hidden scenario, seems to have finally made up his mind. Dokja scans the contract, expecting the usual nonsense, but to his surprise, the deal is actually better than he anticipated. However, there is one major issue: it's missing a crucial clause. Byung, thinking he understands the problem, assumes Dokja is talking about a seal. He tries to brush it off, explaining that since a stream contract is soul-bound, a verbal agreement should be enough. Dokja, looking at him like he just heard the dumbest thing imaginable, clarifies that he's talking about something much more important: the ratio. Caught red-handed, Byung lets out an awkward chuckle, probably realizing he can't wiggle his way out of this. He quickly offers a 50-50th split, trying to make it sound generous. To sweeten the deal, he even promises not to charge Dokja for using the channel. But Dokja, being far too smart to fall for such a weak attempt, shuts him down immediately. Byung, clearly not ready to give up, argues that a 50-50th split is the industry standard. Surely Dokja wouldn't expect anything better, right? Unfortunately for him, Dokja is fully aware of how this business works. He points out the obvious: he doesn't have any constellations backing him up, which means when constellations send him coins, a hefty portion gets deducted as a tax by the Dokja system. This is a massive inconvenience, but Dokja isn't the one suffering from it. No, the one really taking the hit is Byung, who has been making an absolute fortune thanks to Dokja's actions. Hearing this, Byung flinches, proving that Dokja hit the nail right on the head. At this point, Dokja doesn't even bother pretending to negotiate. With complete confidence, he declares that he will be keeping every single coin for himself. Byung stares at him, frozen in shock. The two lock eyes, tension thick in the air. On one side, Byung looks like he is about to explode from sheer frustration. On the other, Dokja simply smiles, completely unfazed. Without budging an inch, he states that Byung should be happy with just the commission. The message is clear: Dokja has no plans to hand over even a single coin. Byung immediately rejects Dokja's proposal, calling it ridiculous. Clearly, he still believes he has some bargaining power left. He tries to compromise, offering 70% instead of 100%, but Dokja isn't interested. Realizing that he's dealing with someone completely unreasonable, Byung throws out a weak threat: either Dokja agrees to his terms, or he finds another channel. He even name-drops Gildal, hoping to intimidate him with the idea of partnering with another Dokja. Dokja, completely unfazed, reminds Byung that the advertisements will end soon. Once they do, the constellations will come back expecting entertainment. And right now, the only thing they are watching is Dokja looking dissatisfied, which probably isn't a good look for a broadcast. Under increasing pressure, Byung finally caves and accepts Dokja's terms, though he looks like he just swallowed a lemon. Just when he thinks the nightmare is over, Dokja casually adds one last request. When Byung, already exhausted, asks what it is, Dokja simply smiles and drops another bomb. He wants a contract fee of 5,000 coins. Byung's reaction is priceless. His face twists in pure disbelief, as if he just witnessed the biggest scam in history, but there's nothing he can do. A contract is signed, sealing the deal. With business settled, Dokja finally steps out of the ichthyosaur's remains and emerges from the water. He takes a deep breath, feeling the refreshing air hit his lungs for the first time in 4 days. Every muscle in his body aches, but at least he is no longer inside a giant fish's stomach. Originally, he had planned to finish the scenario in just 2 days, but given the circumstances, completing it in 4 is still impressive, especially when considering that Jung-hyuk in his 4th progression also took the same amount of time. That alone makes Dokja feel slightly accomplished. On top of that, he is satisfied with securing a streaming contract with Byung. The extra coins will come in handy, and he still finds amusement in how Byung's face scrunched up the moment he asked for 5,000 coins. That reaction alone was worth it. As he stands there, he reflects on how ironic the situation is. In his past life, he never got anyone to sign anything. But now, thanks to all the knowledge he gained from reading Teaser, he has turned into someone who can pull off deals like this without breaking a sweat. Dokja glances down at himself and immediately decides he needs new clothes. After everything he just went through, his current outfit is practically falling apart. Just as he makes this mental note, a system notification pops up, reminding him that his 4th wall skill is still active. A few minutes earlier, he had pointed out a system error to Byung, explaining that he couldn't access his attribute window. Byung, being the doubtful and nosy creature that he is, tried to interfere, thinking it was just some minor issue. The moment he attempted to mess with it, he got zapped by Dokja's skill, effectively blocking his access. Back in the present, Dokja smirks, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He didn't expect his skill to be strong enough to keep even a Dokja from meddling. That's a win in his book. However, his moment of smugness disappears the second he steps into the area of the second main scenario. Almost immediately, he is hit with a poisonous fog. A system notification warns him that the scenario area is highly dangerous and advises him to hold his breath and go underground as fast as possible. Watching all of this unfold, the abyssal black flame dragon seems to be enjoying the show, its wicked smile practically radiating satisfaction. Dokja, realizing that things are about to get much worse, mentally braces himself for the upcoming challenges. The empty streets are now covered in a thick, deadly mist. Then, out of nowhere, a deafening roar echoes through the area. Not far from him, a giant rhinoceros and an equally massive praying mantis are locked in a fierce battle, tearing through whatever stands in their way. Because apparently the poisonous gas wasn't enough, now he also has to worry about oversized murder bugs. Meanwhile, Dokja manages to find a convenience store and takes the opportunity to grab some clothes. After changing into something less torn up, he starts gathering food supplies, preparing for what's ahead in this second main scenario. Once he has everything he needs, he knows it's time to move. The effects of the item he used to breathe in the poisonous air are starting to wear off, which means staying above ground any longer is not an option. Dokja relies on an item called Elaine Monkey's lungs to survive the poisonous air. By taking a bite, it clears out toxins from his system, giving him about 20 minutes before he needs another. It's not exactly the most convenient method, but it keeps him alive. As he moves, a faint voice calling for help catches his attention. He pauses, debating whether he should get involved. Deciding it's worth checking out, he follows the sound and soon spots a woman crawling on the ground. The sight stuns him. He hadn't expected anyone else to have survived in this deadly atmosphere. Without wasting time, he picks her up and carries her on his back. The purifying effect from his item is running out, so he has to find shelter fast. As he runs, he quickly considers his options. Oksu Station is completely destroyed since it's above ground, meaning it's no longer safe. The next closest underground station is Geumho Station, so he makes a beeline for it. When he arrives, he finds the entrance blocked. Not the best sight when time is running out. Thinking quickly, he wonders if the other side of the station might still be open. Before he can act, the woman on his back speaks up, mentioning that Exit 4 is a safe zone. At Exit 4, a group of people are about to shut the entrance. Dokja, seeing his one chance slipping away, jams a thorn into the gap to stop them from closing it. The people inside freeze, startled by the sudden interruption, and take a few cautious steps back. Their reactions make it clear they don't trust him. With no patience for their hesitation, he firmly tells them to open the door. Instead of cooperating, they start stuttering and tell him to leave. When he explains that the woman on his back is injured and needs help, they still refuse to let them in. Dokja frowns, trying to recall if anything like this happened in the novel. He doesn't remember this particular development, which only makes things more frustrating. Seeing no other choice, he grips the thorn, preparing to force his way in. If they won't open the door willingly, he'll make sure they don't get a choice. Dokja forces the roll-up door open, causing a loud, jarring noise that makes the entire entrance rattle. The people inside scream in panic, clearly not built for any sort of crisis. As soon as he steps into the safe zone, they scatter like cockroaches, running for their lives as if he's some kind of monster. Watching them flee, Dokja isn't impressed. If anything, he's just mildly annoyed at their over-the-top reaction. He carefully sets the woman down against the wall before handing her the Elaine Monkey's lungs item. He instructs her to put it in her mouth, explaining that while it won't heal her completely, it will neutralize the poison in her system. For a moment, he observes her closely, wondering if she's someone important from the novel. The thought lingers in his mind: if this were the original book, there's a good chance she wouldn't have made it this far. He considers checking her character profile, curious to see if she holds any significance, but before he can, the cowards who had run off earlier return, and this time they brought someone new. The new arrival, radiating pure arrogance, demands to know who Dokja is. Dokja, unfazed by the theatrics, gives his name in the calmest way possible. The man immediately gets angrier, making it clear that he wasn't just asking for a name. He wanted to know what kind of person Dokja is. Typical tough guy behavior, trying to act important in a world that's already falling apart. As their exchange continues, one of the survivors suddenly notices the injured woman, causing the new guy to react. He recognizes her as someone from the so-called outcast group. The man then turns to his companion and questions why she didn't return with the rest of them. His companion, clearly uncomfortable, struggles to give a straight answer. It doesn't take long for the man to put two and two together. His companion had tried to take advantage of her and then left her for dead. Instead of showing any real remorse, the guilty survivor just chuckles awkwardly and gives a half-baked apology to a guy named Chalsu for acting selfishly. Dokja watches this unfold and tries to recall if there was ever a Chalsu in the novel. Nothing comes to mind, which means the guy probably isn't important. If he were, Dokja would have remembered. Honestly, none of this surprises him. With the world in chaos, people immediately default to the most predictable and disgusting behaviors. Crimes like this happen so often in apocalypse stories that they feel like cliches at this point. One of the survivors steps forward and demands that Dokja hand over the woman. Before things escalate further, however, their attention shifts to something far more interesting: the food supplies Dokja had gathered. Their eyes lock onto it like starving animals, completely forgetting their original intentions. Cholsu, fully embracing his role as a third-rate villain, demands that Dokja leave the food behind and get lost if he values his life. Dokja takes a moment to reflect on how people in reality somehow manage to fit into the most predictable cliches. This situation is no different: self-proclaimed thugs trying to establish dominance in a world that's already gone to chaos. The way things are going, you can already tell this isn't going to end peacefully. Before he can act, a system notification pops up. The constellations, watching like an angry audience witnessing a rigged game, are furious. Seeing injustice unfold in front of them must have hit a nerve, and their collective outrage triggers an unexpected event. At their request, a bounty hunter scenario activates. The timing couldn't be better. Dokja grips his thorn and stands up, sizing up the situation. What could have been a headache is now an opportunity. He might be outnumbered, but he isn't the one who should be worried. Cholsu, completely unaware of the disaster about to hit him, cracks his brass knuckles together and throws out another weak threat. He makes it clear that if Dokja doesn't leave, he will make sure he never walks again. Dokja, unimpressed, just takes this as further confirmation that this guy talks way more than he can fight. A quick glance at the new F-rated sub-scenario. Eliminate the grunts reveals the conditions. Take out these low-level thugs in 5 minutes. The system keeps the reward and failure penalties hidden, but it doesn't really matter. Dokjan's already made up his mind. He carefully sets the injured woman against the wall, then without hesitation, delivers a brutal right hook to Cholsu's face. The impact is immediate. For all this tough talk, Cholsu crumples like a paper bag, his body sent flying straight into a wall. So much for being intimidating. The rest of the thugs freeze. Their so-called leader just got launched across the room like a cheap action figure, and now they don't know what to do. Still, not wanting to lose face, they cautiously surround Dokja, trying to figure out if they even stand a chance. Unfortunately for them, they don't. The difference in stats is too massive to ignore. Dokja is sitting comfortably at level 33, while these guys are still struggling in single-digit territory. It's not even a fair fight. Instead of wasting energy, Dokja goes for the most effective strategy, targeting their legs. One by one, the thugs drop like dominoes, unable to react fast enough. They might have thought they were the predators here, but in reality, they were nothing more than background characters in someone else's story. Cholsu, barely holding himself together, watches warily as Dokja approaches. His face is swollen from the earlier hit, making him look even more pathetic. Dokja quickly pulls up his character profile, expecting nothing special. But what he sees actually catches him off guard: Monarch of the Small Fries. Of all the possible choices, Cholsu picked the one that literally announces him as the king of weaklings. Dokja almost feels bad. Almost. To confirm his suspicion, he casually asks if Cholsu is connected to the Choldo group. Cholsu, still shaken, reacts with genuine surprise, not expecting to be recognized. Dokja remembers him now. This guy was supposed to be the absolute worst person in Geumho Station, a walking disaster in the novel. More importantly, he was supposed to be dead. According to the story, Geumho should have wiped him out already, so the fact that he's still breathing is confusing. Cholsu, sensing the shift in mood, tries to act tough again. He hints that he has killed before, attempting to put himself on the same level as Dokja. Hearing this, Dokja feels nothing but irritation. He recalls his own past decisions, the time he threw the bugs, the moment he chose to let Nanwoo die. The thought of being a murderer crosses his mind, but he quickly pushes it aside. Thanks to his fourth wall skill, Dokja easily sees through Cholsu's bluff. The guy is trying to manipulate the situation, but it's a pathetic attempt. Without hesitation, Dokja drives his thorn straight into Cholsu's wrist, cutting off whatever nonsense he was about to say next. Cholsu lets out a scream, but Dokja isn't in the mood for his theatrics. He reminds him of one simple fact: he is in no position to talk. If Cholsu wants to play the tough guy, then he better act like one. Dokja also remembers something important: Cholsu's supporting constellation is a masochist, the kind that gets enjoyment out of watching their avatar get beaten down. Dokja, knowing exactly how to use this to his advantage, doesn't hold back. He lands a brutal kick, followed by a few punches, making sure the constellation gets its money's worth. Cholsu's so-called friends stand frozen, too scared to intervene. Eventually, one of them, barely able to watch, begs him to stop. Dokja turns, glancing at the unconscious woman nearby. The sight makes him reflect for a moment. Humans are weak. Physically, mentally, so fragile in every way. And yet even the weakest of them are capable of the worst kinds of violence. Is it the chaos of the world that brings it out, or is it something buried deep inside them from the start? Still, he needs answers. He glares at Chulsu and demands to know why he did it. The thug, beaten and exhausted, just stares back silently before spitting out a curse and telling Dokja to end it already. That response surprises Dokja. Chulsu isn't just acting on instinct. This isn't mindless survival. There's something else going on here. Dokja looks at Chulsu's bloody face and notices something unexpected: sorrow. It was there long before the world turned upside down, just like it had been for him. The scenario countdown ticks down, only 10 seconds left. Dokja stands and considers the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Chulsu wasn't completely wrong. Then, acting on instinct rather than logic, he delivers one last kick. A loud crack echoes through the air. A system notification immediately appears announcing that all conditions for clearing the scenario have been met. The reward is 300 coins. Not the biggest payout, but enough to prove that this world only recognizes results, not morality. As he observes the ruined world around him, he acknowledges a harsh truth. This isn't just survival anymore. If he wants to keep going, he needs to adapt, whether he likes it or not. One of the bystanders, still shaken by the scene, mutters something about how cold-blooded Dokja is. It doesn't bother him. He has bigger concerns. With the woman still unconscious, he lifts her onto his back and instructs the remaining people to lead the way to their group. When they arrive at Geumho Station, people are visibly shocked. A group coming down the stairs, half of them injured, isn't something they see every day. Before Dokja can take in the scene, a familiar voice calls his name. Looking up, he sees his friends from the subway. From the distance, Sanga's voice stands out, but before she can reach him, Jiliong is already sprinting forward. Without hesitation, the kid throws his arms around Dokja. Sanga and Hansung follow, relief written all over their faces. Hansung, guilt still lingering in his voice, apologizes for leaving Dokja behind. But Dokja doesn't blame him. Hansung didn't have a choice. The soldier then explains that Junghyuk had been right. He had told them that Dokja was probably still alive. Curious, Dokja asked about Junghyuk's whereabouts. Turns out the regressor left the station yesterday. Only then does Dokja fully understand why Chuldo group members are still alive. Junghyuk left before dealing with them. As he and Sanga watch the station's people helping each other, another realization hits him. Junghyuk has become a force that controls everything, a monster in his own way. Unlike the others, Junghyuk moves forward, always focused on his own goal. Dokja, on the other hand, is the one stuck cleaning up the mess he leaves behind. Without meaning to, he speaks his thoughts out loud. His friends hear him, but before they can react, he dismisses it as nothing, just a habit of his. The secretive plotter, amused by his words, watches in approval. Wanting to change the subject, Dokja asks about Myango, but before anyone can answer, a commotion breaks out. A group of men suddenly barges in. Dokja immediately senses something is off. Then he spots Myango, the same man who abandoned him on the bridge. And now here he is, standing in front of everyone, pointing straight at Dokja and shouting accusations. With wild energy, he declares that Dokja is pure evil and must be thrown out. The same guy who ran like a coward just days ago is now standing tall, trying to turn the crowd against him. Dokja sighs. Some people really don't know when to quit. Before Myango can keep running his mouth, a hand lands on his shoulder, stopping him mid-rant. A slim man steps forward from the crowd, his presence immediately drawing attention. Introducing himself as Inho Chien, he speaks with the kind of confidence that suggests he thinks he's the smartest man in the room. Dokja hears the name and instantly recognizes it, but frustratingly, he can't recall exactly where from. He introduces himself as Kim Dokja, keeping his expression unreadable. One glance at Inho's eyes is all it takes to confirm something important. This guy has a sponsor. Instinctively, Dokja grips his thorn, preparing for the inevitable. With the way things have been going, he fully expects to be ganged up on for beating half of them into the ground earlier. But instead of hostility, something unexpected happens. They start applauding him. It takes a second for it to sink in. These people, instead of demanding revenge, are actually grateful. Apparently, beating up the resident thugs has earned him some appreciation. Inho, ever the opportunist, gathers everyone and announces that Dokja has brought food. That's all it takes. Suddenly, the tension shifts and people begin grinning at him, their attitudes flipping the moment they hear about supplies. As Dokja officially gets welcomed to Geumho Station, Inho flashes a smile. It's polite on the surface, but his clenched fist says otherwise. Dokja doesn't need to hear a single word more. He already knows how this man's future is going to end. A little later, Hansung pulls him aside and gives a status update. Currently, 86 people are living in the station, a number much lower than Dokja expected. Hansung explains that most of them came from the train cabin and nearby stations. Hearing this, Dokja comes to a grim realization: every single person inside is a murderer. Hansung, looking exhausted, admits something even worse. The station isn't just a chaotic group of survivors, it's divided into two factions. The major group consists of Manga and those who support his twisted ideas. These are the ones with influence controlling how things operate. Meanwhile, the minor group is made up of those who have no real power. They don't follow Manga by choice, they do it for protection. Dokja doesn't say anything, but it's clear what this means. The real danger here isn't the apocalypse. It's the people who are trying to build their own little kingdoms inside it. On the other side of the station, Manga and Geumho stand before the gathered crowd, talking like self-appointed leaders. But while Manga is focused on his usual nonsense, Geumho's gaze keeps shifting toward Dokja. The attention isn't exactly surprising. People like Geumho always take an interest in anything they can control. Meanwhile, Hansung explains the station's situation. Supplies are running dangerously low, forcing people to scavenge for food outside. Among those sent out is Huwon, the woman Dokja had saved earlier. Dokja takes note of something important. Hansung didn't join the major group. Despite his strength, he chose to stay with the weaker faction. It isn't just a simple choice, though. Hansung clearly feels uneasy about the way things are being run. Deciding that the miners are where he belongs, he distances himself from the people in power. However, he still struggles with his own doubts. Hansung criticizes himself, calling himself a hypocrite for worrying about right and wrong in a world that has already fallen apart. He starts rambling, but Dokja quickly shuts him down. Without hesitation, he taps Hansung's right chest and tells him that it's better to worry about right and wrong, even if it makes him a hypocrite. The words catch Hansung off guard. For a moment, he just stands there, visibly moved. Before he can respond, Geumho steps in, cutting the conversation short. He asks to have a word with Dokja, leaving little room for argument. Later, Geumho makes his pitch. He wants Dokja to join his group. Hansung, standing behind him, barely tries to hide his boredom, letting out a loud yawn. Geumho, pretending not to notice, offers a high-ranking position. He paints a picture of leadership, promising that they could lead the group together. Dokja, already expecting some kind of manipulation, wonders what would happen if he refused. As if reading his thoughts, Geumho laughs, brushing off the idea as if he hadn't even considered it. Then, with the fake sincerity of a practiced politician, Geumho speaks about obligation, claiming that someone with Dokja's power should feel responsible for leading others. Dokja, seeing straight through the act, doesn't bother responding. He lets the silence stretch, watching as Geumho continues. Realizing that charm alone won't work, Geumho shifts tactics, trying to appeal to something else. He gestures toward the struggling survivors, pointing out how they are suffering without enough food. He asks Dokja to think about them, as if that will somehow convince him. Dokja doesn't react. Instead, he lifts his gaze and focuses on something else entirely, the glowing exit sign above. A moment later, Hansung asked Dokja if he had to refuse like that, so Dokja asked him back whether or not he wanted Dokja to join the majors. Hansung clearly refused that. He kept thinking about how Geumho had asked Dokja to find him again if he changed his mind. Dokja just nonchalantly ignores it while offering his friends food for dinner. Before Dokja can properly react, someone calls out to him, and almost immediately, a crowd starts forming. More and more people gather, their numbers growing alongside their hostility. Then the accusations start flying. The crowd claims that Dokja hoarded all the food they worked hard to gather. Their voices rise as they demand that Geumho take charge of the supplies, insisting that only he can distribute food fairly. Dokja stands there, genuinely shocked. The sheer distance between reality and the nonsense they are shouting is almost impressive. These people weren't there when he fought to stay alive, yet they speak as if they personally suffered because of him. Just as he listens to the misplaced outrage, a realization hits him. The most dangerous kind of person in a post-apocalyptic world isn't someone like Cholsu. Cholsu was predictable, violent, reckless, and easy to deal with. But someone like Geumho, that's a different story. Through the gaps in the crowd, Dokja spots Geumho watching from a distance, and finally, the missing pieces click into place. Now he remembers. Geumho from Geumho Station. The man who built his power not through strength, but through manipulation. Unlike common thugs, Geumho doesn't need to fight. He waits for people to become desperate, then turns their suffering into leverage. He whispers just the right words, nudges just the right emotions, and before anyone realizes it, he's the one in control. Right now, Geumho has backed Dokja into a corner. Either Dokja hands over the food and becomes the hero, officially handing power over to Geumho's system, or he keeps it and becomes the villain, turning the entire station against him. It's a masterful setup. A trap where both outcomes benefit Geumho and screw Dokja over. Dokja grips his bag of food tightly, anger burning just beneath the surface. The injustice of it all is infuriating, not just the lies, but how easily people eat them up without question. Before he can make a move, a new system notification appears. The second scenario area has officially begun. The system instructs him to locate the trigger point and move forward. A well-timed distraction. But it doesn't change the fact that this fight isn't over. Meanwhile, Inho stands at a distance, watching the chaos unfold. The entire station is now yelling at Dokja, demanding that he surrender his food. For Inho, this is almost too easy. The people are doing exactly what he wants, following his lead without even realizing it. As the tension builds, he confidently steps forward, already convinced of the outcome. Then, with full authority, he announces that Dokja will give him the food because, in the end, Dokja has no other choice. Or at least, that's what he thinks. Dokja agrees to hand over the food, and for a brief moment, Inho feels victorious. But his satisfaction is short-lived. Dokja doesn't intend to give anything for free. Instead, he declares that he will sell the food for coins. The crowd falls silent, confused by the unexpected condition. Inho's expression shifts slightly, his moment of triumph already slipping away. Dokja keeps his tone casual but makes his point clear he doesn't trust Inho to distribute the food fairly, and if people truly need it, they can buy it like any other transaction. Murmurs spread through the station. This isn't how things were supposed to go. They expected submission, not negotiation. Meanwhile, Dokja turns to his group and informs them that they aren't getting freebies either, they'll have to pay just like everyone else. Then something unexpected happens. The woman Dokja saved earlier steps forward. With calm confidence, she states that Dokja is absolutely right. She is not a charity case. For the first time, her name is spoken, Huiwen. She introduces herself properly, but more importantly, she openly thanks Dokja for saving her life. Turning to Sanga and Hyunsun, she tells them to consider what Dokja went through to get the food. This wasn't handed to him, he fought for it. Her words sink in. Sangat and Hyunsun exchange glances, then nod in understanding. They don't hesitate. They agree to pay. Sanga steps up first, trading her coins for food, setting the example. Jillian follows shortly after, making his own payment. Then, in a small but endearing moment, Jillian hands over extra coins, a payment for the chocolate he ate earlier. Huiwen watches this with approval, clearly proud of the kid for understanding fairness. Then, Huiwen drops a bombshell. She reveals what the major group has been doing. They've been manipulating the food supply, sending people outside on false scavenging missions only for those same people to never return. Just as this revelation spreads, the mood shifts again. Now, instead of arguing about the prices of Dokja, people start whispering about the true cost of trusting Inho's group. Some begin to wonder maybe Dokja isn't the problem. Maybe the price of his food isn't too high. Maybe they've been paying a far worse price all along. Dokja remains confident that sooner or later, desperation will force people to buy from him. Survival makes even the proudest people lower their heads when hunger kicks in. By nighttime, most of the station is asleep, but Dokja stays awake even when Hyunsun tells him to get some rest. Before they can continue the conversation, a group interrupts them, and just like that, the night vanishes into morning. By the time Huiwen sees Dokja again, she immediately notices something shocking. His bag is completely empty. It doesn't take long to figure out why. The smaller group eventually gives in and buys the food. That part is expected. The real surprise comes when the larger group does the same. Then Inho decides to make a grand announcement, clearly enjoying himself. He acts like he is in full control, wearing the smug expression of someone who thinks he is the smartest person in the room. With fake authority, he declares that food rations will now be limited to 3 biscuits per person per day. Dokja and his party stay silent, watching as frustration spreads through the crowd. People start complaining, their voices growing louder. And just when things seem bad, Inho finds a way to make them worse. Instead of calming the people down, he tells them that if they want more food, they should just go outside and get it themselves. Instantly, the mood shifts from frustration to outright fury. The station is now on the verge of chaos. Then Inho turns to Dokja and drops his final bomb. With a smug grin, he claims this decision is all because of Dokja. He reveals that the larger group want half the food, but instead of sharing it with everyone, he will only give more to those with valuable skills. And as he speaks, something strange radiates from him, like he is using a skill. Dokja immediately understands what is happening. Inho has activated Insight, a dangerous ability that manipulates emotions. Suddenly, everything clicks. Inho never cared about buying food. His real goal was to turn the entire station against Dokja. Huiwen, standing beside Dokja, quickly evaluates the situation. She sees the flaw in Dokja's plan. Selling food to weaken the larger group, but if they also bought from him, then the balance of power hasn't changed much. Dokja remains completely unbothered. He simply points out that he earned even more coins because of it. Huiwen stares at him, now seriously wondering if even his own party trusts him at this point. But when she realizes he sold everything, her patience finally reaches its limit. Annoyance flashes across her face, and she does not bother hiding it anymore. Before the tension can escalate further, Jillian quietly steps forward and offers some of his own food to Dokja. He is willing to share whatever little he has left. Dokja refuses instantly. Instead, he gives his party a strange order. They must eat all of their food right now. He offers no explanation. The rest of the station falls into desperation. The major group now controls the food, and they are charging ridiculous prices for it. Anyone without coins is left with nothing. The real fight for power has just begun. Dokja stands alone at the rails leading toward Yaksu Station, already planning his next move. Deep in thought, he barely notices when Hwon approaches. She warns him that people who go down that path never return. Her words mean little to him. Without hesitation, he climbs on the platform. Before he can focus, Hwon unexpectedly thanks him for saving her life the previous day. She keeps it brief, then gestures toward a man nearby, the same one who tried to attack her. Her expression stays calm, but her meaning is clear. That man belongs to her, and no one should interfere. Curious, Dokja checks her character profile. So far, she has no constellations, but before he can analyze further, her sharp breath catches his attention. The major group has just thrown a group of elderly people and a woman outside, fully aware they won't survive. The sight makes her furious. Before she can do something reckless, Dokja stops her. He knows that fighting back now won't change anything. Even if she kills a few of them, the real problem remains. Without food, they will all starve anyway. Taking another look at her profile, he notices something interesting. Her attribute is crouching figure. It's rare, but more importantly, it has one of the strongest effects on an avatar. Hwon struggles to hold back, unable to accept just watching innocent people being sent to their deaths. But Dokja stays firm. He explains that fighting now is pointless. The food crisis is the real war, and unless they fix that, nothing will change. At this moment, he seriously considers bringing her into his group. Her profile is too valuable to ignore. Focusing back on the situation, he offers her a deal. He will take care of the food issue. All she needs to do is wait. He is certain that Baeyong will show up soon. And then right on cue, a bright light cuts through the darkness of the station. Everyone immediately recognizes the presence of a Dokja. But the moment Dokja gets a clear look, he realizes something is wrong. This isn't Baeyong. The explanation is obvious. Baeyong must be getting punished for breaking some rule. The new Dokja is different. Its fur is pitch black, its robes shimmer with gold, and unlike Baeyong, it doesn't waste time. Scanning the crowd, it casually points out how unusually calm this station has been. Then, with a simple snap of its fingers, everything changes. Suddenly, every single piece of food and stock lifts into the air, floating above the stunned crowd as if gravity no longer exists. A heavy sense of dread fills the air as everyone watches, unable to do anything. Then, with another snap of the Dokja's fingers, the real nightmare begins. In an instant, the food vanishes. The station erupts into chaos. Panic spreads as people scramble around, desperately trying to understand what just happened. Before anyone can catch their breath, a new system notification appears announcing a new scenario survival fee. From now on, everyone has to pay 100 coins per day just to stay alive or face consequences. Just like that, survival becomes even harder. Once the Dokja disappears, Inho jumps into action. He quickly gathers everyone and announces a new rule. Only those who join the search team will be given food. His frustration is clear. He didn't expect the food to vanish and is now struggling to deal with a mess. When he looks at Dokja's calm expression, doubt creeps into his mind. Did Dokja know this would happen? Dokja watches Inho get more and more uneasy, calm as ever. He wonders if Inho will start suspecting him, but it doesn't matter. If Inho can't prove anything, there's nothing to worry about. Turning to Hwon, Dokja casually explains that he had been thinking about what the Dokja might do next to make things worse. That's all. But inside, Dokja knows this situation is much bigger than he first thought. And as he scans the notification bar, something strange catches his eye. He doesn't remember ever seeing the survival fee scenario in the original story. For the first time, he starts to wonder if the contract he signed with Baeyong has somehow changed the course of events. Before he can think too deeply about it, Hansung calls out to him. He suggests they join the search team, but Dokja immediately shuts it down. They need to find a new food source, not run around chasing after what's already gone. Dokja's gaze shifts toward the railway, and in that moment, everyone instantly understands his plan. He turns back to his party and simply tells them they're going monster hunting. A few minutes later, Dokja and his group step onto the railway, following the faint traces left by monsters. As they move forward, Dokja is surprised to see that Inho doesn't try to stop them. This realization brings a new understanding. Every time he earns someone's trust, impresses them, or figures out their thoughts, his understanding level increases. But Inho isn't the type to just sit back and do nothing. Instead of interfering directly, he sends someone to spy on them. As they continue down the railway, a familiar face joins the group, Myongo. Of course, it had to be him. And true to form, Manga is already proving himself to be completely useless. The moment he sees the bodies scattered along the tracks, his face goes pale. Fear grips him, and he barely manages to keep himself together. Meanwhile, the rest of the group stares at him in disbelief. Not even 10 minutes into the journey and he's already freaking out. Dokja quickly realizes that Manga isn't a real threat, just a walking distraction at best. At the same time, Hansung watches Huan with a worried expression on his face. Even though Dokja stopped her earlier, it's clear that she hasn't let go of her anger. As the group moves forward, Dokja suggests sending the woman and child back, explaining that the road ahead is too dangerous. Huan immediately disagrees, refusing to accept that excuse. She doesn't buy the whole too dangerous line for a second. Dokja, already tired of the unnecessary banter, shuts them down with the simple truth: anyone can be strong if they increase their stats. To prove his point, he calls on Giliong. Without hesitation, Giliong touches the ground, and from his fingertip, a thin strand of light emerges. At the end of the strand, a cockroach appears and delivers a message: they are safe for another 100 steps. The realization hits the group. Giliong has the ability to communicate with bugs. With quiet confidence, he tells everyone not to worry about him, making it clear that he isn't just a kid. The group presses on, but soon, Sangha stops in front of a massive wall blocking their path. When she reaches out and touches it, the system immediately reacts. A new sub-scenario appears. On the other side of the wall, dozens of monster corpses lie scattered across the ground. Dokja instantly recognizes them: ground rats. Only one person could have done this: Jungyuk. However, despite the rats already being dead, the system demands that the group hunt them, meaning the scenario is still active. Realizing that they will have to fight, Dokja turns to Huan and asks if she has good combat skills. A few minutes later, Dokja gets to work. Using the bones of the ground rats, he crafts makeshift swords for the group. The effort catches the attention of several constellations, earning their approval. Once the weapons are ready, he offers one last piece of advice: they should invest their coins in strength, because in his mind, not everyone will survive this scenario. Before anyone can dwell on his words, a rattling noise echoes from the darkness. The group tenses up, instinctively preparing for an attack. Then, a pack of ground rats emerges. Hansung reacts first, stepping forward and drawing his sword. Without hesitation, he plunges the blade into one of the creature's stomachs, but more rats immediately charge toward Huan. She, however, proves more than capable. With one powerful swing, she cuts through multiple rats, dropping them instantly. But her attack isn't perfect. One rat barely survives and scurries away, attempting to escape. Before it can get far, Giliong is already waiting for it. Without hesitation, he swings his weapon, smashing the rat's head in. The kid doesn't even flinch. Sangha moves swiftly, stabbing the rat in the back of the neck and ending its struggle instantly. Meanwhile, Dokja continues fighting calmly, his movements efficient and calculated. He lands a precise strike, slicing a rat clean in half. He takes a moment to observe his party and is genuinely surprised by how well they are handling themselves. By the time the fight is over, Dokja has taken down 4 rats. Huan manages to kill 2, while Hansung finishes off 3. For a moment, Dokja feels a familiar frustration creeping in. Hansung's strength is leagues ahead of his, and it's starting to get on his nerves. If he wants to keep up, he will have to start investing more into his own stats. Then, as if to make things worse, he remembers that Hansung has a starter pack, a convenient boost that not only increases his stats, but also grants weapon skills. Dokja tries not to think about how unfair that is. Meanwhile, Sangha voices the question no one wants to ask: how exactly are they supposed to eat these rats? Dokja, completely unfazed, assures her that they'll figure it out. This answer earns him nothing but glares from his party. For a second, he wonders if his response was too casual. Before he can think much about it, Hansung suddenly asks if he knows the future. Dokja pauses. That's a dangerous question. He can't just give an honest answer, but before he can decide what to say, a loud scream interrupts the conversation. Manga. For once, Dokja is actually relieved by his existence. All attention shifts to Manga, who is currently being dragged away by a rat. Sangha rushes forward, grabbing hold of him, trying to pull him back. Then things go from bad to worse. Instead of saving Manga, Sangha ends up getting dragged along with him. Before anyone can react, both of them disappear into the underground. Hansung immediately tries to chase after them, but he's too late. For a moment, Hansung and Huan stand in front of the gaping hole in the railway, trying to process what just happened. Worry creeps into their expressions. However, Dokja already has a plan. He takes Giliong with him and jumps down after them. His decision isn't random. Giliong's skill makes him the perfect guide in a situation like this. Before leaving, he quickly tells Hansung to keep an eye on Huan. Hansung, still tense from the situation, turns to Huan and notices something important. Her neck is still bruised from earlier injuries. She has been pushing herself without rest, and now that he looks closely, he realizes that Dokja was right. She needs to be watched. Meanwhile, Dokja and Gillian move through the dark tunnel. With Gillian leading the way, they navigate the pitch-black surroundings. The darkness is so thick that it's impossible to tell where they are going. But one thing is clear, they are heading straight into the unknown. As they move through the tunnel, Gillian suddenly speaks up. Without hesitation, he asks if Dokja intentionally let Sanga and Myango get dragged away. He isn't just guessing, he saw Dokja watching the entire thing unfold without doing anything. Dokja doesn't deny it, and almost instantly, a few constellations express their displeasure. He doesn't need to explain himself, Gillian is too sharp to be lied to anyway. Instead, Dokja calmly states a fact: ground rats tend to hoard whatever they catch. They store food, rare items, and other valuables in their lairs. Gillian immediately puts the pieces together. Dokja wants something inside the rat's nest. But even though that part is true, Gillian knows it isn't Dokja's real reason. After all, Dokja had already saved him once before back on the train. Gillian trusts Dokja, but at the same time he doesn't fully understand why. Meanwhile, Dokja knows exactly what kind of world he's in now, a world where people will try to take advantage of him at every turn. Just as they near their destination, Gillian suddenly stops. Then, with complete seriousness, he asks if Dokja is a god or the protagonist of this world. Dokja immediately denies it. He is neither. He simply knows things. But then, Gillian asks another question: is there a reward at the end of all the scenarios? For the first time, Dokja doesn't answer right away. Gillian starts trembling, sensing the weight of Dokja's silence. At the same time, Dokja's thoughts drift elsewhere. He remembers the people who lost their minds in this new world, people like Namun who became violent because of their suffering. Then he remembers others, the kind who prey on the weak, using the apocalypse as an excuse to justify their cruelty. But then there are people like Gillian, people who still hold on to optimism even in a world that tries to crush them. And that's why Dokja ultimately agrees with him. As Dokja places a reassuring hand on Gillian's shoulder, the field around them suddenly shifts. The surroundings change, revealing a grim, eerie place covered in massive roots. In the center of it all, a mysterious box glows with an ominous purple light. Then, without warning, the sub-scenario updates. A scratching sound echoes from inside the box, and Dokja, sensing danger, instantly covers Gillian's mouth. Something else is here. A low growl rumbles from the distance, and suddenly, a blue light appears near the box. The ground rats freeze in fear, their instincts screaming at them to run. Then faint voices drift from the corner of the room: Myango and Sanga. They are both tied up with roots, and unsurprisingly, they are already arguing. As Dokja watches the mess unfold, he finally realizes why Myango wasn't driving his fancy car earlier. Turns out Myango had stolen Sanga's bike. His excuse: he wanted to drive her home. Dokja barely holds back a sigh. It makes so much sense now. And of course, Sanga isn't letting this slide. The two continue shouting at each other, their argument growing louder and more pointless by the second. Finally, Dokja has had enough. Without saying a word, he lifts his thorn and takes aim. For a brief moment, there is complete silence. Then, Dokja throws it. The thorn bolts through the air, cutting through the darkness like a spear. Myango, mid-rant, notices immediately, but it's too late. The spike doesn't hit him directly. Instead, it flies just past his head, embedding itself into the wall behind him. Instantly, the argument stops. Both Myango and Sanga freeze, realizing that Dokja and Gillian have been standing there the whole time. Dokja expected something to happen, but even he didn't anticipate what came next. The wall where the spike landed starts cracking. Myango and Sanga snap out of their argument and immediately go on alert. Then something else happens. A swarm of bugs gets caught in the impact and dies instantly, but only Gillian notices this. Meanwhile, Dokja is too focused on something far more important. The rats are trembling. Their fear is so intense that they seem frozen in place, and then he senses it. The dark flames rising from the depths of the lair, and from the center of the massive, tangled roots, something appears. A tall figure emerges, its skull-like face hidden beneath a deep hood. But that's not the worst part. From beneath the robe, numerous tentacles slither and move unnaturally. The Keeper of the Dark has arrived. At that moment, Dokja finally notices the effect on Gillian. The bugs had died instantly, and Gillian must have felt it. His expression twists in discomfort, his breathing uneven. Without hesitation, Dokja tells him to rest. Then, without a single glance at the towering creature before him, Dokja calmly walks past the Keeper as if it isn't even there. Dokja moves quickly, cutting through the roots binding Sanga and Myango. However, he immediately notices a problem. His knife, which should have been sharp enough for this, is already blunt after just a few cuts. Of course, because nothing can ever be simple. Before he can dwell on it, the keeper shifts its attention to him and his group. Without hesitation, Dokja tells them to stay back. He already understands what's happening here. The rats have been collecting items not for themselves, but as a sacrifice to a much stronger species. And now, that stronger species is standing right in front of them. Dokja, however, has no intention of fighting it. Then the keeper speaks. For a split second, Dokja is caught off guard. Then, without warning, a heavy aura of fear floods toward him, pressing down like an invisible weight. But just as it tries to take hold, his fourth wall skill immediately activates, completely blocking the effect. The fear slides right off him, leaving him completely unaffected. However, this only makes the keeper angrier. The flames in the lair flare up, growing more intense, casting dancing shadows along the twisted roots. Meanwhile, Jiliang is still weak, barely able to stand. Even though Dokja doesn't want to fight, it's clear he has no choice anymore. Before he can react, Sangha suddenly says become a mother. Dokja, caught off guard, turns to her in confusion. Not only is she still standing near him, but she also seems to be paying close attention to the keeper's words. She's trying to understand it. It doesn't take long for Dokja to realize why. Sangha has an interpretation skill. With her ability, she pieces together the keeper's message, and what it wants. It wants to be a mother. Before anyone can process this, the keeper slowly raises one of its many tentacles. Then it points straight at Myango. Dokja and Sangha barely have time to react before the tentacle surges forward at terrifying speed. In the blink of an eye, it shoves itself straight into Myango's mouth. Dokja and Sangha stiffen in horror as Myango is forced to swallow something. It only takes a second for Dokja to realize what's happening. The keeper isn't just collecting sacrifices, it's trying to use other species to carry its offspring. Dokja doesn't even hesitate. He sprints forward and slashes through the tentacle in one clean strike. The keeper lets out a piercing scream, writhing in pain, but isn't done. Immediately, it retaliates, multiple tentacles lashing out at Dokja. He barely manages to block the attack, but Sangha watches from behind, her expression filled with worry. Because even though Dokja is holding his ground, this fight is far from over. Dokja keeps fighting, dodging, and countering as best as he can. But there's a problem. His sword isn't built for this. After taking too many hits, the blade finally gives in, shattering mid-fight and leaving him completely unarmed. That, of course, is exactly when the keeper decides to slam a tentacle straight at him. Without a second to spare, Dokja jumps away, barely avoiding the impact. The tentacle crashes into the ground, leaving a deep indentation. At this point, Dokja knows one thing for sure: he isn't winning this fight with brute force. Instead, he calls out to the Dokja. As he continues dodging the relentless attacks, the Dokja finally appears, but instead of helping, it flat-out refuses. Unfortunately for the Dokja is not in the mood for nonsense. He reminds the creature that the constellations are watching. More importantly, they are very interested in this fight. That's all it takes. Under pressure, Biryu the Dokja has no choice but to comply. And as Dokja continues evading the keeper's attacks, Biryu opens the mail. Inside is the item Dokja had obtained from an auction house, the trade he made for the ichthyosaur's nucleus back in the belly of the beast. And just as Dokja planned, he hits exactly what he needs: a sword named Broken Faith. The moment he summons it, the blade materializes in his hand. Without wasting a second, Dokja swings it. But strangely, the keeper stops attacking. For the first time, it looks surprised. Meanwhile, Biryu lets out a laugh, completely unimpressed. After all, the sword is broken. Only a small piece of the blade remains, barely enough to be called a weapon. Biryu thinks it's hilarious, but Dokja already expected this. He doesn't even react to the mockery. Instead, he focuses his energy into the weapon. And then it starts to glow. Both Biryu and the keeper freeze as the sword suddenly radiates an intense light. Without hesitation, Dokja attacks. The moment the sword makes contact, a brilliant white light bursts from the impact, flooding the entire area. Biryu, who had been so quick to laugh earlier, is now speechless. What he doesn't know is that Dokja had bought a set of skills from Baeyeon back in the ichthyosaur's belly, and one of those skills is White Star Aura. This specific skill reacts to Broken Faith, amplifying its power, and as a result, the sword's energy increases dramatically, engulfing the entire blade in pure white light. The keeper, refusing to go down easily, prepares its next attack. But Dokja moves first. He swings his sword, slicing straight through the incoming tentacles. A piercing shriek fills the lair as severed tentacles drop to the ground. But as much as Dokja now has a powerful sword, there's still one tiny problem: he isn't a swordsman. And because of that, he loses too much mana too quickly. Realizing he can't keep up this pace, he activates his reading skill. The keeper doesn't give him a break, it lashes out with another attack, and Dokja barely dodges in time. He quickly flips through his bookmark skill, scanning for an option. The pages turn rapidly until he settles on bookmark number 2. Immediately, a green silhouette surrounds him as he activates one of Hansung's weapon skills. Now the real fight begins. Dokja's power surges as he charges toward the Keeper, cutting through another tentacle with ease. Even with its wounds, the Keeper refuses to give up, still thrashing and trying to fight back. But Dokja isn't alone. With Hansung's shadow boosting him, he moves faster, slicing through the tentacles on the other side. He grips the sword with both hands and leaps toward the Keeper, already knowing that it always pauses briefly after each attack. Taking advantage of this, he moves in for the final strike. With one clean motion, he slices straight through the middle of the Keeper, landing on the ground behind it as the creature lets out a deafening scream. His party watches in stunned silence. Sanga, still using her interpretation skill, relays what the Keeper is thinking, wants to know how Dokja knew its attack patterns. And as the Keeper collapses, Dokja casually states that it just needs more reading. The constellations watch in fascination, clearly impressed by the fight's outcome. Meanwhile, Biryu is still processing what just happened. Another sword appearing this early in the scenario. That wasn't supposed to happen. Dokja, unfazed, points out that this isn't a real other sword, it's a one-time use item. Then, getting straight to business, he asks for his reward since the sub-scenario is now complete. A system notification confirms their victory, granting them 500 coins. However, Biryu then presents an interesting offer. Does Dokja want to finish the Keeper off? Dokja immediately refuses, but of course he lies about the reason. He claims he doesn't believe in unnecessary killing, which sounds noble enough, except everyone knows that's absolute nonsense. The real reason is killing the Keeper would draw the attention of the Demon King, and whoever does it is guaranteed to suffer. With that matter settled, Dokja turns his focus to something more important, the glowing box. Biryu, however, is standing in the way. Instead of wasting time arguing, Dokja simply kicks him aside and walks forward. But before he can claim the prize, something unexpected happens. A blade suddenly pierces the Keeper's body. Turning to look, Dokja sees the culprit, Manga. Manga stands there, smirking, completely full of himself as the Keeper takes its final breath. He laughs, loudly celebrating his so-called victory. Then, right in the middle of his hysterical gloating, a notification pops up. The system informs him that the Demon King has cursed him. At that moment, Manga's smile vanishes. Dokja, watching this disaster unfold, simply shakes his head. This is exactly why he didn't kill the Keeper himself. Now, instead of being the target, Manga is the one who's doomed. While Manga stands there regretting his life choices, Sanga and Jiliang look at Dokja with admiration. Dokja, as always, just smiles and moves on. Together, they open the box, discovering 2 items, a bracelet and a shield. Dokja isn't particularly excited. If Geumho was here earlier, then he definitely took the best items already. Still, they have one more box left. So without hesitation, Dokja opens it. Inside, he finds a mana brazier. Immediately, he recognizes its value. This is exactly what they need for their next step in the sub-scenario. Wasting no time, Dokja sets up the brazier and begins cooking the ground rat's leg. The moment the meat starts sizzling, an irresistible aroma fills the air. Sanga, Jiliang, and even Hansung watch with anticipation, completely entranced by the smell. And as the meat finishes cooking, Dokja takes the first bite. The rest of the group leans in slightly, waiting for his reaction. The meat tastes delicious and Dokja enjoys it, so he gives a piece of the leg to both Sanga and Jiliang. He just had an experience he could only read about before and makes everything taste even better. Then he suddenly hears Manga's stomach growl loudly. Manga awkwardly asks if he can join them. When he sits down with the group, Dokja tells him that he'll need energy to fight off his curse. The 4 of them eat happily when Sanga asks how Dokja knew all this. She assumes he knows because he reads a lot of web novels. She feels embarrassed, thinking she can't do much. But Dokja responds that the only reason he can defeat it is because Sanga understands the Keeper. It seems like she caught on. She noticed that Dokja wanted the box for a specific reason. It turns out the box is a random item box. To avoid the question, Dokja praises Sanga for her ability to read the language. As they finish eating, Sanga encourages Dokja to keep whatever item is in the box for himself. Dokja reaches into his pocket and pulls out the Keeper's core, placing it in the box along with Broken Faith. He knows that if he puts random items inside, the box will turn them into something rare or powerful. Biryu has no idea about the box until it's too late. Dokja already places a low-grade object inside, and it's already in the process of turning into a high-grade item. The box begins to glow with a blinding purple light. Biryu immediately shuts down the stream as the box gets brighter and starts rattling. Dokja wants a weapon stronger than an A-grade, and suddenly, a beam of light shoots from the box as the item appears. Dokja realizes the random item box could pose a real threat to the scenario. That's why Biryu is panicking. When he asks Sanga and Jiliang to open the box, they're surprised to find a beautiful sword inside. The sword, called Unbreakable Faith, is a constellation artifact above any legendary grade items. Dokja decides he wants to keep it, and both Sangha and Jiliang agree with him. Once everything is settled, Dokja tells the group to head back. But Jiliang interrupts, saying that all the bugs are dead, so there's no one left to lead them back. Then Jiliang drops a bombshell. There's still one bug left. His body tenses up and he starts murmuring in some strange language. Dokja and Sangha look at each other, worried, but Jiliang doesn't seem to hear them. Suddenly, a loud rumble shakes the entire place. Jiliang's eyes turn white and blood starts to drip from his nose. Up above, an earthquake shakes the surface too. The lair trembles again, and it turns out that Jiliang has been calling one of the giant bugs from outside. It's a mantis, and Jiliang has summoned it toward them. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you did, hit that like button, as today's like goal is 1,500 likes. Comment next part down below to see what happens next. Also, consider subscribing with the notification bell on to get notified as soon as a new video drops onto the channel. You can also join the channel to support me financially and watch videos before public release. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching.